Hiyo ndio silaha ya kupambana na adui. Asanteni sana. Nimeshukuru. Naunga mkono huu mswada. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Asante. Sasa tunampata Senator Mbugua George.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, allow me to appreciate your office and the majority and the minority leaders for giving us this opportunity so that we can speak on the status of our country. Allow me also, Mr. Speaker, to send my condolences to the people, both the Gen Zs and the police and the general public who perished during this time of these skirmishes. Mr. Speaker, the events surrounding the debate, the passing and the withdrawal of the finance bill were unprecedented. We've never had this issue, we've never seen our young people coming out in the numbers they came out. And Mr. Speaker, it marked a turning point in the governance of this country. Honorable Speaker, I would want to take this opportunity to thank the young people because they have woken up, they have made the leadership of this country to wake up and to decide to change the course this country was heading to. Honorable Speaker, the finance bill was just a trigger of the many things which have not gone well in this country. And the young people came out clearly telling us that they are not doing these things for themselves only, they were doing for their parents, their brothers and sisters, and those people probably who don't have the energy as they do to come out and speak the way they did. I thank them for that. Mr. Speaker, this country for many years has had to deal with the problem of inequalities. The gap between the poor and the rich have been widening to the extent that we've agreed that there are those people who are called wananchi and wanyainchi. And what the young people are telling us is that these things must change. Honorable Speaker, the Gen Z have said in very clear language that they don't want so many stories. They want action. And Honorable Speaker, I will attempt to bring 3 action points which I think would help to alleviate the problems of the young people. Honorable Speaker, Article 54 and 55 of the Constitution addresses the issues of the young people of this country and also the issue of the people with disability in this country. And in the attempt to actualize these articles, Mr. Speaker, Parliament in its own wisdom enacted the Access to Government Procurement Act of 2015, whereby, as a law, it was decided that 30% of all government procurement will go to the marginalized groups, that is the youth, the women, and the persons with disability. But what has happened, Mr. Speaker, we all know, because we live in this country, that this law has never been actualized as it was intended. Honorable Speaker, is just to give you an example, we operate a budget of about 3 trillion. And we assume that 30% of that go to development. It means we have about 1 trillion which goes to the purchase of goods and services. And if this law was to be followed to the letter, about 300 billion would go to these marginalized groups. Honorable Speaker, our honorable colleague has talked about the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. These are the people who are supposed to make sure that this act is adhered to. I think it is important as an action point, Mr. Speaker, that we call these people here and they tell us what is wrong, why have they not been able to actualize this so that the young people of this country the people with disabilities, and the women benefit as the parliament of this country intended to. Also, as an action point, Mr. Speaker, because the young people have spoken and they have said they want to see action, I would urge the government and this House, because we just entered the new finance budget cycle, we must prioritize in the first quarter that the procurement which the government will engage in should go to the youth and the other marginalized groups. Honorable Speaker, when these young people were demonstrating and they were coming to Parliament, you could see the anger, the determination. And then I pondered and asked, what is this which have made these people very angry? And I thought, probably among this young generation, there are people among them who are educated by their parents, and their parents spent everything, probably even sold their land, because we've been told in this country since we were young that usome, utapata kazi mzuri, na utaishi maisha mazuri. And these young people went to school in the hope of getting jobs and helping their parents, but they were faced with helplessness. Mr. Speaker, Article 55 of our Constitution, as read together with the Persons with Disability Act of 2013, reserved 5% of employment in all government ministries and parastatus to persons with disability. And if I can read for you, Mr. Speaker, one article said that this was to be actualized progressively. Over 240 government agencies in this country have never employed any single person with a disability, yet we have a law. And the excuse they give is the Constitution says it has to be implemented progressively. And because, Mr. Speaker, the youth have said that we need action, at some point maybe these are a constitutional moment where we have to look at the weaknesses of some of the laws we have. And I think it's time we remove that term progressive so that we can be able to enforce this. In that said report, Mr. Speaker, out of the entire workforce of the Republic of Kenya, only 1.32% are persons with disability. So when you see some of these young people with a lot of anger, you imagine that their children whose parents were disabled and they thought they would help them, but it could never come to be. Mr. Speaker, I was very happy the other day when I heard His Excellency the President saying it is time that we wind up some of the parastatus which are performing the same function. In that note, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring to the attention of this House that when it comes to matters disability in this country, Parliament enacted the National Council for Persons with Disability Act 2003, which is a legally mandated body to handle matters to do with disability. Also in this country, Mr. Speaker, we have another fund called the National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya, which is registered as a the Trustees Perpetual Succession Act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this body received government money over the last years, and over the last 20 years, and it has never been subjected to any parliamentary oversight. This institution, in spite of receiving hundreds of millions of shillings from the Exchequer, it has never been audited by the Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, when I raised a question on the floor of this House so that we can engage this body, it took a whole year before the trustees could agree to appear before the committee. And when they came, Mr. Speaker, and we asked them what they do, They act as an investment company, and all the money they have been receiving, they have bought buildings, and whatever goes to help the persons with disabilities is a mere 30%. Mr. Speaker, I want to bring to the attention of this House that among the other things which shocked us when the trustees of this fund appeared to us, they have put a whole Kenya shillings 780 million in a fixed account. This is taxpayers' money, which was meant to help the persons with disability. As an action point, Mr. Speaker, I would be calling on this House that we call these two institutions here and they address how they have been spending the money given to them. Mr. Speaker, I would be imploring on this House, Mr. Speaker, that we must insist that this money, which is taxpayers' money, put in fixed deposits, be immediately made available and distributed to the various disabled groups in this country. Honorable Speaker, Mahatma Gandhi once said that the true measure of any society can be found on how it treats its most vulnerable members. And these are the children, the elderly, and the persons with disability, Mr. Speaker. As the National Assembly attempts to amend the finance bill, Mr. Speaker, we would be requesting that they don't touch the cash transfers which helps these vulnerable people in our society. On the issue of public debt, Honorable Speaker, the executive, through the President, has attempted to audit what Kenya owes to other countries. And Mr. Speaker, that issue put parliaments in a very awkward position. Because to an average Kenyan, what they know is before any debt is taken, Parliament is involved. Parliament should know which institution, which country is lending us money, how much they are lending us, at what interest, what is the repayment period. So when we reach a situation where, Mr. Speaker, it's like we don't know how much we owe, then the Kenyans are asking, what is the role of Parliament? This House, through the Parliamentary Service Commission, Mr. Speaker, have employed the best minds in the Republic. At a click of a button, Mr. Speaker, you would have expected that Parliament can come out and say, according to us, as the representatives of the people, this is the amount of money that the government of Kenya owes, and these are the people who have lent us money. But it should never be that we are where we are, that we don't know how much we owe. This one, Mr. Speaker, put the institution of Parliament into a very awkward position. Mr. Speaker, I also want to address the issue of deprecation of duties. When we devolved through our Constitution 2010, Mr. Speaker, and we created the counties, very, very many functions are duplicated. When you go to our counties, Mr. Speaker, you find an agriculture officer paid by the national government, another one by the county government. You'll find a children officer paid by the county government, another one by the national government. I think it is time, Mr. Speaker, that Senate take the lead and audit the 2020 Constitution and ask ourselves, is it really sustainable? What are the weaknesses that we've had over the last 12 years? Because honestly, Mr. Speaker, things are not working. The young people spoke very clearly. And as I repeat, and they said they want action. It is now upon us, the leaders of today, that we must sit down, and I'm happy that is what we are doing. Senior positions we must be prepared that yes, the Gen Zs are there, but after them, the Generation Alpha are coming. These are even more. It is a high time that we realize that in our public engagements, we must bring everything on the table. There is nothing to hide, because this country, Mr. Speaker, belongs to all of us and more so to our children. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this motion, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Manzo Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the two leaders of the House for coming up with this motion and for summarizing it very well. Mr. Speaker, what happened on 25th of last month is unprecedented in this country. Young people go to demonstrate peacefully, Mr. Speaker, but the moment there are peaceful demonstrations and the police think that they should be dispersed, then under the Public Order Act and this regulation they are under, which are actually 20 years old, the last ones were done by former Attorney General Amos Wako, other consequent ministers did not. But even with those old regulations, and even with Public Order Act and the Penal Code, there has to be a proclamation loud and clear in a speaker by escorting police of a level of an Inspector General that the peaceful demonstrations have turned rioters and therefore people must disperse. After 15 minutes, that proclamation order is supposed to be repeated. Whoever doesn't disperse, Mr. Speaker, then action can be taken. What I expected the police to do is just guard businesses and let the demonstrators do their thing. And I believe no one would have died. Unfortunately, we have lost 41 people, and quite a number of people are in hospitals. In Makueni, Mr. Speaker, we are burying 4 people. We buried one last Saturday, and another one is being buried today. There is a funeral on next Friday of a young man who was shot actually by an OCS, and on Saturday there is another one. We have people who are still missing and are not known where they are. So my condolences to the families who have lost their dear ones, and also wishing quick recovery to those in the hospital with all manner of injuries, from head injuries to bullet wounds, Mr. Speaker. I really want to say that although the President has promised to bury the deceased, up to now we buried Rex last Friday in Machakos, a young man who was going to work. But because he happened to have been in Rastafaris and happened to have passed near the crowds, a police officer decided to shoot him. And after shooting him, when the young people cried that he could get help and should be taken to hospital, and even wanted to help them with their doctors, the policeman, who is very well known and has not been charged so far, Mr. Speaker, said, "Let the young man die." So they watched him bleed to death, yet he had just injuries at the leg, which would have been, salvaged. But therefore, so there is no compensation yet. There's no reprieve. There's no one who has been taken to court. And there's no one who has been sacked or any action taken against that particular. So I'm sure the Gen Zs are watching, and this is one of the issues they really want to deal with as time goes by. Mr. Speaker, the cause of this was the finance bill. And the finance bill, public participation took place. And I remember at KICC, Kenyans really pleaded with the state and with the parliament. But unfortunately, with the finance bill, in fact, long time ago, during the days of Moi, the Minister for Finance, after reading budget, the next day you will hear price list given for beer and for this and that. That doesn't happen today exactly. But, Mr. Speaker, the finance bill is designed at Treasury with the experts, some from international organizations which fund us, then goes to Cabinet, then comes to the House goes to do public participation. So the input of the people, unfortunately, very little was adopted, and very little has been adopted over the years. The same bill now came to the House, and the usual lobby took place, and members of Parliament, majority voted yes, and irritated the young people because they did not imagine the hardships life will face. Mr. Speaker, I have engaged some of these people who are in these demonstrations. And most of them, Mr. Speaker, are graduates. They come from poor families. Even as graduates, they have tried to join the army. They have been asked for bribes. Police, the same. Any of KWS. And some of them, Mr. Speaker, some of the stories I've received from constituents from Makueni, they've even sold land to raise the bribe of 300,000. After you pay the bribe, you cannot see the people you pay the bribe, and your child is not taken either to the army, police, or forest, or KWS. And therefore, you end up with a very depressed young person with all the talents, surrounded by poverty, unable to fight poverty, and watching now the cost of living rising. And they have told me, Mr. Speaker, they rather die doing something. They rather die visiting us here. They rather die visiting the House of the Hill. They rather die visiting the judiciary, or those they think have let them down. And that's a very difficult position to correct. And quite a number, a majority of them, quite a number, have that idea that they rather die doing something than just commit suicide or do something else. So that level of depression, Mr. Speaker, has been compounded by when they saw the church support politics in an unfair manner, and also they've seen the wasteful lifestyles of some of us in government. Some of us who already are doing many things, and it's also very expensive to move government from one place to another, even when they are doing important things. A good one example is a recent visit to the US, Mr. Speaker. Really, some of the people went to the US, even if it was a paid-up trip by a benevolent person. I'm sure the governors had to spend their own monies for the days they stayed there, even some extended. There were very many idlers in that trip, and even one of the very frustrating things to many young people here is the issue of disability, which has been talked to by the wonderful senator. And I participated in the 1998 bombing, where a lot of people became disabled. And we summoned the body dealing with disability here, Mr. Speaker. And the stories they gave were horrifying. We asked them why they're not accommodated, even these ones who were bombed. You know, truly, government has failed people in that regard. Most of these children were born were either a year old or were born after, and the ones who are a year old or so, quite a number of them, including the driver of Mr. Kamotho, had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. That 1-year-old of 1997, who is now a Gen Z, never saw the father ever be compensated, who woke up to go to work, but never came back, having been bombed and having died in the bomb. A lot of the people are just transiting. Every single county in this country was affected. And all these people have gone to court. People have been in hospital. They have been frustrated over the years. Yet, when this trip was done for the US, the people we sent from the committee, or the people we sent from this house and any other government person we engaged, in fact, we engaged the minister in charge of foreign affairs. The embassy in Washington was very frustrating on this particular matter when we went to Washington. And many other government departments have been.